Sawabona family, today in the classroom, joy is resistance. We are celebrating today. First and foremost, we're celebrating episode 1 streaming live from YouTube. Also, yesterday was my anniversary. I'm super happy. First year down, many more to go. As we mentioned to you all last time, rest is also resistance. So we're going to be checking in with you all to see how you've been resting, especially with everything that's been happening these last couple of weeks.
Happy anniversary, Anthony.
Thank you.
I love the party hat there. So along with checking in on joy, on rest, we also have an amazing guest for you today, the one and only Dr. Cherina Betters. So stay tuned because the Critically Conscious Classroom is next.
Microphone check 1 2 1 2. Welcome to the Critically Conscious Classroom. Class is in session. I'm your AXA Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and one of your co-hosts, Anthony Robinson.
And I'm Dr. Tracie Noriega, the Senior Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Professional Learning. And I'm so happy to be here with you today. Happy anniversary again, Anthony. It's been an amazing year. It's gone by so fast.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you for being a co-conspirator in this work.
Absolutely.
Next door neighbor, and I can just pop in and just say all the things, right? So I apologize that I'm bugging you so much, but sometimes just gotta let it out.
Right. Dr. Noriega, why don't you tell us where you're coming from? Because I don't see your mic today.
I am coming from the American Educational Research Association here in Denver, Colorado, home of the Arapaho, Utes, and Cheyenne tribes. And it is my first ERA conference, and I am representing AXA on 2 panels. One about critical leadership with folks that you've seen before, Dr. Joaquin Noguera, Dr. G. Reyes, and Dr. Orlando Carrion. Those are the authors, well, 2 of them are the authors of the love letters you've been reading in EdCal. The 3rd one is coming out this weekend. And then later on this weekend, I will be on another panel with Asian American Pacific Islander women leaders. Then we're going to be talking about surviving to thriving as AAPI women leaders in education. So thanks for asking. It's been a good time.
No, I appreciate that, because as practitioners, one of the things that we need to do is make sure that we're embedding our work in research. So I know that's one of the things that we're looking to do here internally at AXA, to take it beyond the traditional trainings and workshops and speaking engagements, but to really take a deep dive into what does the research say? What do the authors say? What do other practitioners say? So really excited for you to be there, really excited to hear more about your panel, but also more excited to start diving into research with you. So Dr. Noriega, I know that there was something that you shared with me a little bit earlier, some breaking news. Can you go ahead and share that with the audience?
Yes. So as of early this morning, and it was shared at our Superintendent's Council on the federal updates. But if you all remember those executive orders, and the Trump administration said that institutions needed to certify, right, sign a certification saying that they were abiding with Title VI. And if you all don't remember what Title VI is, it is the Civil Rights Act that prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, and national origin in programs and activities receiving federal financial assistance. So as of this morning, federal judges filed an injunction, or decided on an injunction. Oops, sorry, I can't talk right now. And I was just looking at this article in Education Week, and I want to read this, this one paragraph. It says, quote, "The federal government has no authority to dictate what schools can and cannot teach to serve its own agenda, and this ruling is an important step in reaffirming that," close quote, in reaffirming that. Sarah Hinger, Deputy Director of the American Civil Liberties Union's Racial Justice Program, they partner with the National Education Association, said that in a statement. And I'll also say this. There's this other quote by Randy Weingarten, who's the American Federation of Teachers president. He said, the court agreed that this vague and clearly unconstitutional requirement is a grave attack on students, our profession, honest history, and knowledge itself. So shout out to the judges that put an injunction on this, right? Because we need to know history, we need to know ourselves, and we need to teach the truth.
And that's why we're standing 10 toes down for this work, right? I've said this over the course of the last 3 episodes. Doing this work can be tough sometimes. It can be heartbreaking. But these are the moments that we live for. These are the moments that we're joyful for. So, yes, absolutely. Shout out to the judge in that injunction. But there were a host of other things happening as well. So, again, we just wanted to check in with you all. How have you been resting? And we have a very specific question that I wanted to ask you all. But before that, let's do our land acknowledgement. So as always, I'm reporting live from Miwok territory, unceded land here in Sacramento, California, from the AXA offices. And Dr. Noriega already shared where she was from. But in the chat, again, as always, let us know where you're from. Let us know where you're from. I'm not going to read the land acknowledgement for the sake of time, but let us know what land you're tuning in from. I already saw earlier, shout out to Dee Walton. She's watching from Sacramento, also on Miwok land. But for anybody else, share in the chat. Where are you coming from? Where are you? Where are you?
All right. I see Neko McKinley from Walnut Creek. The Saklan triblet of the Miwok Native American people. I like that. Very specific.
Welcome, welcome. All right, the chat is spare, so I'm gonna move us along. Thank you, 10 Gizmo for the shout out for my happy AXA-versary. But I want to jump into our question. So as you all remember, 2 weeks ago we had Tovi Scruggs Hussein just really talking to us about resting and why we need to rest and why we need to rejuvenate. So the question for you all today is, how do you think your relationship with rest would change if you fully believed you were worth it? So I'm going to ask that question one more time. How do you think your relationship with rest would change if you fully believed you were worthy of it? And throw your answers in the chats, but I'm going to start out by answering it myself. You know, I was recently talking to someone about grind culture, right? Especially grind culture as a Black man and what that looks like for me. And the fact that institutionally, I just believe in order for me to get ahead, I can't rest. I always have to be 10 times better than the next person. And oftentimes that leads me to overexert myself. And I often feel like I haven't done enough. I haven't earned the rest. I feel like I have to be dog tired. But one of the things that I've committed to and promised myself in this new year that I'm going to move away from that. So I'm currently in the midst of rewiring my brain to remind me that I deserve rest. And in that same fashion, you deserve rest as well. So in the chat, please let us know. Let us know. And Dr. Noriega, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, when we were drafting these questions, or this one had me pause quite a bit. Because it's that last part, right? If you fully believed you were worthy of it, right? And so it goes back to this notion of how are we determining our self-worth? And how as like leaders, like it's a question for us, right? Like how are we helping to determine the self-worth of others? So, when we say things like, so-and-so is the employee of the month because they're always working so hard. They're here late till all hours of the night. You can reach them at any time. What does that particularly say? Right. And, to the extent that we are in a society, right, based on capitalism, based on, and we have to work, right, and because we need to earn money to provide us the basic necessities, all of those things. It's this constant go round of what that is. But when we think of the rest in different forms, so I just want to call us back to the work of Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith, who gave us some different ideas of rest, and rest could look different. It's not just maybe laying down and getting your sleep, although good sleep at night, right, is really, really helpful for everybody. But maybe it's a tech rest. Maybe it's too much stimulation from whatever kind of media, right? Social media, or even just watching TV. Or maybe people really need the watching TV to kind of zone out. So it's understanding what that is in different forms. Maybe it's getting outside. Maybe it's gardening. Something simple as taking a walk. It just could look different at different times. So I just, again, I think it's really important for us to think about what those different forms of rest are and what we might need. And it could look different from time to time, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, thanks to folks here for, joining us and letting us know where they're coming from, right? And hopefully you all are thinking about that type of rest.
The other thing that I'll mention is make sure you're drinking your water. That is a form of rest. Take care of your body. And this is not a plug for this company. Let me just show you the bottle. I love this bottle. It's time for our guest, right? So we're talking about rest. We're talking about celebrations. But we want to transition and talk about, regardless of what's happening around us, doing it anyway. So I want to welcome to the Critically Conscious Classroom one of my favorite people, a person, and I'll jump in front of you, Dr. Noriega, because you always tell the story. So when I met this person a little over a year ago, the first thing that she said to me was, "I thought you were taller." Not welcome to AXA, not how you doing. I thought you were taller. And from that moment, I knew that we would be fast friends. And we grew from being friends. This is definitely my sister. I can certainly call on Dr. Betters for anything, especially this show. But Dr. Noriega, I'll give you your space to share about Dr. Betters, and then we're going to jump into these questions because I'm ready for this conversation.
I have known Dr. Betters since we were on Access State Equity Council together, I believe. And Dr. Betters is actually one of the first of many that reached out to me when I took on this position, giving me all the love and support and pumping me up, right? Because I was suffering from a little imposter syndrome. I don't anymore because that is a whole conversation in itself. What is that? But Dr. Betters, when I first took on this position almost 2 years ago, you were one of the first to say, this is the right thing, right? And we need you in this space. And I'll also say, when we decided to do leadership assembly, and it made it open to every AXA member that wanted to join in to kind of see what happens with that. And it was online. And there was this question of well, who could we bring on to be in the space? And I was like, Dr. Cherina Betters. And if y'all were there, you need to just put it in the chat because what kind of fire Dr. Betters brought to the online stage. And it was amazing. It was super dope from beginning to end. And I think that is probably one of the most well-attended, and we have to look at the recording, how many people continue to watch that. But I think about dynamic speakers, and you are definitely high on that list, Dr. Betters.
Yes, all of the flowers. So let's jump into these questions. So you were just recently with us at the 2025 Equity Institute. And during your keynote, you encouraged us to do it anyway. So what I wanted to ask you is, Despite the external pressures, despite anything that's going on around you personally, what personal practices or mindsets help you stay grounded and courageous in the face of political resistance and or institutional pushback?
Mm. That's major. And I just want to say thank you to both of you for allowing me this opportunity to be in this space. I'm excited to be in this space. ACTS is an incredible organization, and we have two of the best to lead this work for us across this state and across this nation as representatives. So thank y'all for doing this work, and thank you for having me. Absolutely. Do it anyway. So, my personal, I was on a panel yesterday for Cal State San Bernardino, and they asked a very similar question. And I was in my feelings about it in a lot of ways because I feel like we're living in a space where you're always going to get pushback. And I like to tell people that you're always going to be shot at when you're trying to do this work. When you're trying to do anything that's bringing people to parity, there's going to be people who have power and privilege, or who desire it, who don't want to see you have it. But being shot at doesn't mean you're shot. So allow people to empty their quiver of arrows and still stand tall and do the work. Because if you're not doing something that's causing disruption of the environment around you, I think Gandhi said it best, you can't take a single step without disturbing the ground beneath you. So my hope is that we continue to take steps forward. My hope is that we continue to advance, and that when we see resistance, and there's a difference between resisting me as a person. You might not like my aesthetic. You might not like the way I smile. You might not like my chin, right? This is my Nana chin, by the way. We're gonna keep it. But there's a difference between not liking somebody because you're unfamiliar with how they present themselves versus not liking somebody because of their messaging. And I think that our messaging is the right message to do what's in the best interest of each and every. And so I'm okay with receiving the pushback, and I'm okay with standing 10 toes down to say I'm strong enough to push back.
Yeah, you've been supporting administrators up and down all the way around, and with your speaking engagements, with your work in San Bernardino County of Schools, you're a board trustee. I mean, so many facets, right? As well as a community leader. Can you think about a moment or story in your leadership journey and this support that has most affirmed that this work is still possible? Because I feel like it just gets really daunting, right? Like we get really tired, and especially if we feel like we're alone in this work. And I think this is part of why we have this show, is to bring folks together, to know that there are more folks on the right side, than not. But can you think of a moment or a story where that helped to keep you going, that affirmed your work? What was it?
Dr. Noriega, that's a great question. And I'm going to share something I've never shared publicly before, and in part because it just happened. I've been blessed that every time I step out into the atmosphere, there are things that encourage me, inspire me, and want me to live up to the expectation that has been set for each and every one of us to give more than we get. But I was in a small school district in our county. We have 33 school districts. We're the largest county in the country. Geographically, I have the privilege of serving under the leadership of our county superintendent, Ted Alejandre. And so he allows me to run around and do what he's already deemed is in the best interest of each and every child. So I was out in a small school district. I'm talking about small rural school district. And I was surprised. I was taken aback by how many Black students that I saw. And when we were leaving, the superintendent was walking myself out and two colleagues. And there was this young Black boy, probably 7 years old, maybe 8. And he was playing on the playground. And I kind of caught eyes with him as he was coming down the slide. And he locked eyes with me. And almost in a trance-like stance, there's no better way to describe this. He just started walking toward me. And I'm looking around at my colleagues and the superintendent, and I'm thinking, do y'all see this? And the superintendent leans over to me, and he's an older white guy. And he says to me, "Do you see this?" And I'm thinking, "Do you see this?"
Mm.
And he continues to progress toward me. And there's this chain link fence, and he sticks his arms out. And I said, "I think he wants me to touch him." And so I go to touch him. And at that time, the teacher calls him over, and he runs over to the teacher. And he's looking at me the entire time. And he sits in her, right next to her. And he's tapping her on the shoulder, and he's pointing at me. And I told the superintendent, "Can I go hug him?" And if I found a way to get into that gate, I would have. But the superintendent said something powerful. And what he said was, I've always believed that we need to make sure that each and every person has what they need in schools. But I have never really understood how important it is to have kids who are able to look up to adults who look like them in the school environment until recently. And some of these culture war conversations have been occurring. And it was so powerful to me. So I asked the superintendent, "How many Black people do you have as certificated staff here?" And he said, "None." I said, "How many classified?" He said, "None." I said, "How many Black school officials in any capacity do these kids get to look at?" And he said, "I think you're the first one."
Hmm.
And I say that story because that's why I'm in the work. Not necessarily because I need a Black student to look at me and feel that some form of connection, because each and every student should be able to feel like they belong on this planet, in this world, in this space. And if we don't have people that we can look to and know that we can achieve certain things, that baby didn't know my title. He didn't know what I did. He just saw somebody in an area that he never saw, and he saw a semblance of who he was. And so I'm very proud of that. And that is really the call to action, I think, that I try to serve every single day.
That is so powerful, right? And another example of why representation matters and why this work is so important, right? There's so many layers to that in so many ways. So I hope that those school leaders will take that into account and think about their hiring practices or their recruitment practices. And I do think there's something to be said about encouraging young folks to go into education. Are we are we doing anything to inspire the next generation to become educators?
Yes.
I feel like it's really scary right now, right? And in many ways, because at least I know with my work in ethnic studies, a number of folks came to education because they found themselves through ethnic studies, through the stories, through the conversations, and maybe it was the way that they're being taught, right? And so they wanted to be just like that. But when they get into school systems, the pedagogy is attacked as non-traditional, right? Or lack of classroom management, things like that. So I think there's a number of layers to this where we might have representation in terms of diversity, like ethnic diversity in teachers. But what are we doing to support, support those folks? Because the data shows that we've actually been chasing them out.
Dr. Noriega, you bring up an interesting point. I want to stay in that vein for just a second, if you don't mind. I have the opportunity to serve in the capacity of a professor at Cal State San Bernardino, where I've been for the last 4 or 5 years, teaching classes in the College of Education in regards to folks who are getting their masters and folks who are getting their teacher credentials and both multiple subject, single subject, all the gamut. I have the opportunity to be able to serve in. And one of the key elements, I think, in meeting those students, what I believe that their need is, as a practitioner, is doing more than giving them, quote unquote, the technical aspects of what it means to be a teacher, what it means to be an administrator, what it means to be an educator. And I think AXA is doing a really good job, in fact, of trying to undergirding this differently. Some of the times that people have an opportunity to grow in their capacity, in their professional world, are spaces like AXA. So having the opportunity to be the director of the Equity Academy is an opportunity for folks who I feel missed those opportunities as these became prominent conversations. And as we began this push to how we were going to encourage people to be in these spaces in education, we pushed them in, but we didn't provide the environment, the safeguards, the opportunities for them to stay there. And we see that happening time and time again with young people who don't feel that college is for them, who don't feel that some of these opportunities that exist in professional spaces are for them. And we begin to have to dissect that, I think, differently. We have to do better at putting people on the timeline of history and making them feel that their story is important, their way of being is important, and they have something to offer. And so I love that you brought that up. And I think we have to do better about that in general, in all contexts. But I am proud of AXA for creating spaces that allow these things to happen. And I remember Margie gave a strong shout out to Nicole early on in the first episode. And I want to undergird that, because without these opportunities, somebody pushing out that door, these spaces don't exist. So very excited about that. So thank you for that.
Dr. Betters, in this work, just as an educator, burnout is real, right? You talked about getting shot at, and though we don't get hit with all the shots, we're still maneuvering those shots, right? And Dr. Noriega talked about just the heavy lift that it takes sometime being an educator. And we've really been talking a lot about self-care and about wellness. So I really wanted to ask you this. You personally, how are you able to navigate the balance between creating systemic change and protecting your own wellness? And then additionally, how do you do this when the work becomes both personal and ultimately becomes painful for you?
Man, why are you going to hit me with these questions like this? You know what time it is.
We deep over here.
It's deep. So my shirt says unity.
Yes.
One of my best friends gave me the sign behind me that says unity as well, which is from the same artist. And I have to tell you, I believe in community. And I think the most important aspect of community is this notion of unity. I feel that if I carry my weight, if I do my part, then we can uplift everyone in community. But in order for us to be in community, we can't see things that are unfamiliar to us as othered. We can't see things that are unfamiliar to us as something that has to be over there. We have to begin to, somebody has to be a bridge, if you will. When I wrote my dissertation at Cal State San Bernardino, Go Yotes, my title, which was a very lengthy title, but my title was Bridge Over Troubled Water. And what I examined was the student-teacher relationship. And initially, my chair pushed back a little bit. And he said, well, do you really want people to think of young people as trouble? And I said, no. The adults are the trouble. And what we have to do is begin to lay ourselves down. And we have to allow ourselves to be the thing that the next generation walks over. And that requires sacrifice. In this work, you have to sacrifice. And some people, and I want to like it to John Lewis, and we talk about good trouble. And everybody talks about good trouble, getting good trouble, good trouble, good trouble. And I'm like, wait a minute. Don't let us forget that the most jarring picture of this man was his head split open on the Pettus Bridge. Let us not forget that dogs were sent to attack and destroy. So yeah, we can see him in his, member of Congress self. We can see him with his suit and tie self. We can see him at the end, if you will, of his process. And we could think to ourselves, let's go get in good trouble. But good trouble hurts. Good trouble is a sacrifice. But let me tell you why the sacrifice is worth it. There has never been a time. And Tracie, you're going to be a grandma. The greatest gift of my life has being a grandmother. I got to tell you, I love my baby Mars, my grandson. What you value, you are willing to sacrifice for. Can I say it one more time for the people who might not have heard it? When you value a thing, you will sacrifice for that thing. That's why you will get a second job to make sure your baby gets to college. That's why sometimes you might even stay in a marriage longer, because you have these notions of what it means to come from a wholeness of a whole home with two parents. And there's all type of things that we sacrifice for. And we're always willing to sacrifice for what we value. And when you sacrifice, something hurts. And so my question is for all of us, what are we willing to sacrifice to show proof of the value? And so for me, sometimes I do have to sacrifice sleep. I'm gonna keep it real with you. Sometimes I do have to sacrifice time with my family. And that's not foreign to educators, but how do I keep myself in line when I see those types of obstacles approaching and occurring? One, I have to be very transparent with you. I'm a person of extreme faith. I get it from my nana, my grandmother, Sister Laverne Chase Livingston. She died several years ago, but I will never miss an opportunity to acknowledge her because she instilled this thing in me by carrying me to church every Sunday. She instilled this thing in me that said it was bigger than me. So I might just sit on the bed, watch Netflix, and they're not paying me, so I got to stop saying Netflix's name. But just watch some type of TV series and do nothing, right? Because I have to recenter myself. And to recenter myself, when you live at such a high octane level, to recenter yourself, you have to allow yourself to be filled again. And sometimes the nothingness is how I feel myself to go back and engage. So those opportunities are precious to me. I take advantage of them, and I encourage everybody else to do the same because in the words of Ayanna Von Zahn, I share this often. She said, what's in the cup is yours. And you have to let your cup overflow. It's the overflow that you give away. So I like to make sure that my cup is always full, but I go out of my way to ensure that my cup is constantly running over. So that way we were designed to give more than we take. So grateful for that. And absolutely always want to be a person that takes time to take time for self and be able to rejuvenate.
I appreciate that you gave a concrete example of what works for you, right? And your form of rest. And that's I think, an example of that balance. Like you said, we go so hard for what we believe in. And there are just times where we need to settle down, right? Settle down.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful situation. Beautiful situation.
Absolutely. So another question for you, Dr. Betters. There's folks out there that want to know how to do this, right? Or what has worked for them. And so this question is, what are one or two strategies you've used to make equity work feel actionable or relevant for school leaders, and whether they're teachers, whether they're administrators, whether they're classified folks, whether they're community members, right? The term leaders is broad, right? Because you actually need people to assign you that role of leadership. It's not necessarily the title itself. But especially those who are overwhelmed or just don't know where to start, or maybe right now are kind of in this flight, that freeze mode, or maybe they're in the fight mode, like some of us. But what are some strategies that you could recommend?
Oh, that's another great question. And I'm going to borrow something that I heard from a visit to one of our school districts, Needles, which is on the way border of the state of Arizona and Nevada, actually. In fact, that school district splits between California and Arizona, but we claim it. And had the opportunity to visit some tribal lands there. And I asked this question because, I am the chief of equity and access. And a lot of people have said, hey, why do you go by chief? So I was speaking to some of the leaders that I had the opportunity to meet with. And they said, and I was talking to them about, just the title of chief. And what they said was, we're moving away from chief into council. Mm. And I'm going to choose to answer your question based on what it means to sit as council versus chief. The difference between leader and leaders in community. And I think in having that conversation and talking about councils, what they were saying was it's all of our responsibility. Yeah, people have been elevated in the community for whatever reason, tradition, education, what have you. But it's our collective responsibility to do better for the people that we serve. And I think that we have to, one of my strategies is to make the people around me have conversations to make us better, to make me better. Iron sharpens iron. So if I feel like I'm the smartest person in the group, there's a problem. So we got to talk about how we're pushing each other to build our capacity. We want to make sure that the land that we're planted in, I used to run around and want to save the world too. But then I realized it wasn't the world, it was the world that was around me. And we have to be intentional and impactful in the world that's around us. We have to have dialogue. We have to have critical conversations to have a critically understood classroom, if you will, in the larger landscape of it all. But in order for to do that, we have to have those conversations locally. And I think we talk in equity and we say things like this, and this is true: meet people where they are. Then in our backyard, we're unwilling to meet people where they are. And sometimes you feel the redundancy of it. And you say, I shouldn't have to meet you where you are today. And my personal philosophy is I'm willing to continue to meet the new generation, the last generation, where they are, because you should never sacrifice influence. And what you expect people to know that you think they should know by now, they might not know because they never respected the person that they heard it from. And now we have good listeners. And when you have good listeners, you can have good doers. And so I always try as a strategy to start where I'm at. I've been afforded opportunities to be on larger stages across this great nation. Tens of thousands of people I've had the opportunity to speak in front of, 20 I've had the opportunity to engage with. And so, but wherever I am, I try to ensure that space is uplifted in community, and then have a conversation about humanity and how all of us have this shared notion of leadership. In order for us to be better for everybody else, we first have to be better for the people who are closest to us.
And that'll preach itself. Dr. Betters, isn't it so amazing that when you have great conversations, the time just runs out?
It runs.
We are out of time, but you will be back. So, as always, my gratitude, my love, the flowers, all of the things. Thank you so much. It is always an honor, a privilege to be in space with you. Thank you so much. Thank you again so much.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Betters. And you have to provide us with your most famous quotes.
Ooh. So listen, y'all, my most famous quote, of course, is going to come from the Bible, just because of my grandmother's influence. It comes from James, the book of James 1, 2-8. And it says, count it all joy. So I'm going to encourage every single person, despite the ups and downs, the uncertainty, the forgetfulness, the pain, the sorrow, the happiness. Be still with self and remember to count it all joy.
Thank you, Dr. Betters.
You.
Yes. We will.
Thank you, ma'am.
Joy as resistance. Come on.
Joy as resistance.
I love y'all. Thank y'all for having me. I appreciate you greatly.
All right. We'll catch you later. All right, y'all. So we're going to go ahead and close this thing out. But before we do, next week, we will be in Anaheim for the Lead with Pride Summit. That will be, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Noriega. There we go. April 30th to May 2nd. So if you haven't registered, if you're in the Anaheim area, please catch all of us in Anaheim.
Yes.
We want to mention, and we don't know if we have a graphic for this, but we have the Summer Leadership Institute coming up at the end of June.
The end of June, 23rd through 27th, I believe. And we're going to be at the University of Laverne.
Yes.
It's our first time there. It is a residency program. There's air conditioning in the dorms. So that's a plus for you. That's a plus for me. There's air conditioning in the dorms. And our amazing planning committee is putting it all together. We have some great speakers lined up, a great program. So if you are a new principal, if you're a new assistant principal, if you have a new team, come on down, because this is an opportunity to learn about yourselves as leaders together, and then form your team, right? Do that community building with your team. So we're excited about those two opportunities that are coming up.
Yes, ma'am. All right. I'll leave you with this. What's in the cup is yours. Just because you're getting shot at doesn't mean you're getting shot. And make sure to remember to count it all joy. We will catch you in 2 weeks. Peace.